data analytics and Power BI and Tableau. We have Melanie here. I think she graduated. She's from UT Austin, and she's joining as a technology consultant. I'm sure she can tell you more about it. We're really excited to have you here this Saturday. And, we have Alfonso who would be joining later on as well. And we have a packed and hands-on workshop for you. I'll drop in close to 10 to do a poll. And then, again, later on to tell you a little bit more about Skillspire. But I'll let Melanie take it over from here.
Yeah, sounds great. Hi, everybody. Like Yasmin just said, my name is Melanie Milligan, and I graduated from UT Austin. I'm a technology consultant, and I have a big passion for data. I love data analytics. I am a big data analytics nerd, so I couldn't be more excited to be sharing with you some of the things that I love most about data. Just so you all know, this meeting is recorded, so feel free to either leave your cameras on or off, just depending on what your comfort level is, but do know that the meeting is being recorded. Are there any questions before we get started? Okay, sounds good. I will go ahead and share my screen then. And it looks like we have a few more people, so let me just admit them. Alrighty. It looks like my screen is sharing. Could someone come off mute really quick and say if they are able to see my PowerPoint slides?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome, thank you, I appreciate it. Just admitting a few more people. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Well, like I just said, welcome everybody to the Intro to Data Analytics workshop with Skillspire. We're going to be covering a lot of things today, and a lot of them are really, really fun. First, we're going to be talking about what data analytics actually is and why it's so important and why I personally love it so much. And then we are going to dive into some software and some data analytics tools such as Excel and Tableau. So we're going to be doing some statistics analytics as well as some pivot tables, and we're going to conclude with some data visualizations. So all really fun things. And with that, I will go ahead and get started. All right, so before we get into anything else, I just want to open up this workshop by talking about what data analytics actually is, because I think it's a buzzword right now, and we hear it a lot. We hear data analytics, we hear analytics, data analysis, data science, but what I've noticed is that sometimes it's not always defined very clearly, and sometimes people aren't really sure what it is. So to make sure we're all in the same boat and we all have a really good understanding of what data analytics is before we get started, I'm just going to define it. So by definition, data analytics is the process of describing or summarizing raw data so that it becomes something interpretable by humans. So raw data, if you're not sure what that is, just admitting a few people really quickly. Sorry about that. Okay, so raw data is basically just data that's been collected, but it hasn't yet been processed or coded or formatted or touched in any way. And so if you think about it, if you're just looking at raw data, which could be in the form of, let's say, a really big spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers and a bunch of words, that can be really messy and really unorganized, and it's not really very useful. You're not able to see any trends in it or make any predictions or make any business decisions from it. So to put it another way, imagine that you're a manager of a really big company, and somebody at your company sends you this humongous Excel spreadsheet with thousands of columns and thousands of rows, and there's words and there's email addresses and addresses and phone numbers and missing values and all of those kinds of things. So how are you going to make decisions just by looking at that Excel spreadsheet? You're probably not going to be able to unless there's something glaringly obvious in it. And that's why we need to perform data analytics. It's so we can make the data that we collected useful and also be able to make decisions from it. All right, so another key part of data analytics is that it involves the analysis of real-time and historical data to give an idea of future trends. So not only does data analytics involve looking at data we currently have to assess our current state, but it also allows us to make predictions about what is likely going to happen in the future. And if you think about it, that's pretty useful, because let's say we have some data at our company, hypothetically speaking, of course, about sales. It's one thing to just talk about sales and what that means today in terms of this product is generating 50% of revenue. But it's another thing to apply that to the future to help us make business decisions using that data. And then another key part of data analytics is that it involves the analysis of real-time, the real-time and historical data in all parts of the organization. So 90% of most organizations use analytics. And we'll get into this a little bit more in a bit, but the key thing I want you to take away here is that analytics is truly ingrained in everything. You're not going to find a nonprofit or a for-profit business.
That was genial. Who said that?
Was you that I was talking to?
Melanie, you're on mute. Our voice.
Sorry about that. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
All right.
Yes, we
How
can
long
hear
was
you.
I on mute for?
I think like 3 or 4 seconds maybe.
Okay, perfect.
Not long.
Thank you. I was scared I had been on mute for like 5 minutes or something crazy.
No, you're good.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, also, if anything ever happens in the workshop today, like my screen goes blank or I'm on mute or I don't know, something happens, please let me know immediately. That was really, really helpful because I don't want to waste your time by just talking on mute for 10 minutes. Cool. So did we all get the gist of this slide before I move on, since I was on mute for a few seconds?
Yeah, I think so.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, in that case, let's move on. So like I was just saying, one of the really cool things about data analytics is that the applications are endless. It's needed in every industry, in every part of every business. So here are some of the most popular applications. I'm just going to talk about a few of the ones that I find most interesting, but if you have any questions about it, please feel free to ask. So the first one you can see on this slide here is logistics and delivery, which just refers to the supply chain of a business, or basically just getting the product or service from the very beginning point all the way to the customer. So analytics can prevent slowdowns in company supply chains. So like, for example, Amazon will use all sorts of analytics to track your packages and make sure that they arrive on time. Another really interesting one is analytics can help improve search results. So companies like Google will use data such as user search histories, where you click, how long you're looking on a certain page, metrics like that to provide the best search results possible for you. So it's constantly improving and getting better. I don't know if you remember using Google like 10 years ago versus using Google now, but the search results it gives you are a lot better right now because they're constantly improving using data analytics. Another thing that companies will do to improve results is, I don't know if any of you use Spotify, probably most of you do for music streaming, but companies like Spotify will utilize data about the songs that you've listened to and the songs that you've liked in the past in order to give you recommendations on future songs that it thinks that you might like. And that's all data analytics. Another example is fraud and risk detection. So many companies actually have entire branches dedicated to analyzing risk. And that's because risk usually involves companies losing money. So for example, banks will have an entire branch where they, for example, will make predictions about how likely certain candidates for loans are to default on, or in other words, to not pay their loan. Because if that person isn't going to pay back their loan to the bank is losing money. So they're going to be able to use characteristics of that applicant for every applicant that applies for a loan to make a prediction about how trustworthy they are in terms of repaying that loan. So that's one of the most common examples of risk detection analytics. Also in healthcare, this is one of the ones that I think is the most amazing. I actually had a professor a few years ago telling me that he was part of a project which used healthcare analytics. And essentially what they did was use analytics to predict patients' likelihood of developing certain fatal diseases. And so they were able to kind of catch those diseases early on based on using those predictions and help those patients take preventative measures in order to have a higher chance of surviving. So that's a really, really powerful thing. Are there any questions about the applications of data analytics before I move on? All right, I will take that silence as a no, but feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. Okay, so now that we are talking about the value of data analytics, I'm going to move over to what maybe you're more interested in, which is what the job market looks like for data analytics jobs right now. So data analytics related jobs are extremely high ranking right now in terms of salary, in terms of job satisfaction, job openings, and in fact, data scientists have been ranked #1 for the best jobs in America. That is amazing. And these jobs also tend to have really good work-life balance. So if that's something that appeals to you, I would highly encourage a career in data analytics or any sort of data-related job. Another thing is, if you look at the bottom left corner of this screen, you can see that there is a huge demand for entering the data analytics field. So there's a really huge demand for these skills that we're going to learn today, as well as in SkillSpire's Intro to Data Analytics workshop. And you can see that by noticing that data scientist is #1 in the hardest jobs to fill right now, which means there's a lot of job openings for data scientists and not enough data scientists to fill them. I was actually reading an article the other day that said that according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there will be a 23% growth in demand for data analytics jobs from 2021 to 2031, which is well above the national average. So what that means is the job opportunities for analytics related roles are only increasing. Okay, so what kinds of skills do you need to get a job in data analytics or to just explore data analytics? One great skill to have that I would highly recommend is some experience with SQL or SQL, but a lot of people just say SQL, which is a programming language that allows us to access and manipulate databases, which are just really large stores of data. So most companies, if they're medium or large size, will store their data in databases, and we need a language like SQL to be able to access that data. NoSQL is not necessarily necessary, especially if you're a beginner in data analytics, but it's just a variant of SQL that some companies will use. But you don't need to worry about that right now, unless you're interested, which in that case, feel free to ask questions. But yeah, another great skill to have is some knowledge of some programming languages. So the ones listed here are R, which is typically used in academia and statistics. There's Python, which is commonly used in software engineering, as well as for many data professionals. And then we also have MATLAB, which is commonly used in the sciences and engineerings. And I would highly recommend that you, if you're new to data analytics and wanted to learn one of these three, I would highly recommend that you would learn Python because it's just so widely applicable in industry. And most companies will have people using Python. The next thing that it's really good to know about in data analytics is something about data visualizations. Let me just admit a few people. Yeah, so with data visualizations, something to keep in mind is that creating graphs and charts and dashboards, which we're going to talk about today, makes it easier to quickly communicate the findings that we have from our data to people like managers and other stakeholders that might not be as technically minded. Because it's one thing to be able to find these trends in the data, and it's a completely other thing to be able to communicate them and make them useful. In addition, it's good to have some experience with Microsoft Excel, which lucky for you, we're covering today. And Excel, in my opinion, is a really awesome tool to learn, especially if you're just starting with data analytics, because basically every company uses Excel, or many, many companies use Excel. You don't need any programming knowledge to be able to use Excel, and it does all sorts of things, whether you want to create some mathematical models or predictions, or you want to analyze your data in charts and tables, you can make graphs, all sorts of things. It's really, really awesome. And then moving on, critical thinking is another skill that's really, really good to have in data analytics, because one thing that people are really looking for today is people who are able to look at data and ask questions about it and find new trends and find problems and see what's wrong and come up with new ideas and be innovative. And so critical thinking is really key there. With math and statistics, it really just depends on what kind of role you want to do. Some analytics jobs are more math heavy, whereas some are a lot less math heavy. So it really just depends on like what you enjoy doing and what you're good at. And then finally, communication skills are also, oh, I see we have a raised hand. Is there a question?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, you were talking about math and statistics, like it depends on what kind of industry you're in. And also I noticed that you're using data analytics and data science very tangibly together. And I was just wondering, like, what's the main difference between those two? I know you define them, but in terms of statistic and maths, what's the main difference?
In terms of the difference between math and statistics?
Yeah, for these two specific job roles, like data scientist and data analysis.
I see what you mean. That is a great question. Thank you so much. Let me actually go to a future slide because I have a little and we'll come back to this later. But as you can see on this slide, there's kind of three categories. On the top, we have the business analytics professional. On the bottom, we have the data analyst. And on the right, we have these more mathematics and statistics heavy roles. And the data scientist, as you can see, is right there in the middle at the intersection of business, so domain knowledge, data and technical skills, and math. Whereas typical data analysts will fall more heavily into just this data category. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but it also pops another question in my head. Is that, so BI, business intelligence, it would be in like the green part, I'm guessing.
Right.
So that's slightly away from data scientist. So a BI analyst and analyst is like two different things, right?
Right. And it also kind of depends because some companies will use data analyst very loosely. So sometimes what a data analyst does at one company might be different than what a data analyst does at another company. But in general, yeah, like the business intelligence analyst would be more in this business analytics professional. Whereas like a data scientist is probably going to be doing more things like running models and collecting data and stuff like that. But again, it really depends on like what company or organization you're working at.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Are there any more questions?
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
How popular is AWS, like Amazon Web Services? I don't know if you could speak on that in any capacity.
Yes, that is a wonderful question. Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, you're fine. It's just I'm seeing that some companies are like transitioning over or starting testing waters and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. AWS or Amazon Web Services is basically a cloud solution that companies will use, just for those of you who don't know, who will use to store their data and manage their data. Among other things, there's a lot of things that it can do. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about AWS, I would highly, highly recommend it because many companies are using it right now, and it is a very in-demand skill. Actually, at like the job I was just doing, we used AWS like every day, and a lot of people in our organization did as well. Did that answer your question?
It did, but I may have a follow-up question for you later, like how to get started, because it seems like a big ocean to try to figure out, where to navigate to.
Yes, for sure. It can be really intimidating. And we can get into this a little bit later, but they have different like certifications that you can do where Amazon actually provides like step-by-step tutorials and using their resources. And then you can even get certified in that like through AWS themselves. But in terms of like more resources, we can definitely talk about that later. Thank you. All right, let me just, are there any more questions before I dive back in? Okay, cool. Yeah, keep up these questions, guys. This is great. It makes it much more fun. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So yeah, these are some of the popular tools in data analytics. And yeah, AWS isn't on this list, but I think it should be. So that is a great call out. And if you have any more questions about what that is, or if you're not sure what AWS is, that's completely fine. You don't need to know right now. But if you do have questions, feel free to ask. But as you can see, yeah, there's tons of tools. The ones over here on the left are the ones that I would say are probably better for beginners or people who are like just diving into data analytics and want to learn something, particularly Python, Excel, and either Tableau or Power BI, because Tableau and Power BI are both visualization tools that are very similar. A lot of companies will also use SAS, and a lot of academics will use R, but it's a little bit less common in industry. And then these tools on the right are probably more specific to certain companies. So like if you went and worked at a specific company, they might ask you to learn one of these tools. But I would definitely focus on these ones on the left. And it's not something you have to do alone. We have courses at SkillSpire that teach these things, and they're all really, really fun, and I would encourage learning them. But yeah, that is what I wanted to say on these popular tools. Now we'll get back to this slide of the job titles. I'm just going to very briefly go over this slide since we already looked at it. But the key thing I wanted to emphasize here is that there are like different categories of what could be considered jobs in the data analytics field. We have like the business analytics professionals who might be people who don't want to do quite as much coding, who have a lot of domain knowledge and really, really love business. There's the data analyst side, sorry. for people who might really like coding or databases or SQL. And then there's also these more math heavy roles, like people who might be making models, or earlier when I was talking about the banks that are predicting risk, those people might be included in this math section. And then again, just to reiterate, the data scientist is kind of the combination of all three of these things. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide, which has some common careers in data analytics. These are like the top 10 most popular ones right now. So just like look over this screen, and I would encourage you, if any of these sound interesting to you, maybe look on a website like Indeed.com or something like that to look up like a little summary of like this role. And also, if you have any questions about these roles, feel free to ask us. But these are like the most common careers in data analytics right now that have a lot of demand. So I'm just going to leave it up for like 1 second, and then I'm going to move on. Oh, I see there's a question.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, I have a question. So I was just wondering, when you talk about risk analyst, does that involve like being a cybersecurity analyst as well?
Yes, I think it depends on what company you're at, because a lot of times these roles, like companies will say like one thing and it means different things at different companies. But typically a risk analyst involves more of like the company's risk in terms of like losing money, let's say, whereas like the cybersecurity analyst is more focused on like cybersecurity, but they really go hand in hand. And in some companies, they are pretty similar.
Okay. So is there an intersection between being a data analyst as well as a cybersecurity analyst? Say, for instance, you have a degree in cybersecurity, but you have like an interest in data analytics. Is there a way you could combine that, and are there job roles for that?
Absolutely. That is a great question. And yes, the answer is definitely yes. If you have a background in cybersecurity, that's really great, because in data analytics, like something that can be really useful is knowledge of these like tangential or very related areas. So if you have knowledge of cybersecurity, you can use that in your data analytics career if you're interested in kind of pivoting a little bit, and that can be really valuable. Especially because in cybersecurity, usually there's already some like technical skills there or some knowledge of that. And that applies really well to data analytics. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Okay, I will move on. So now we're going to talk about the 4 levels of analysis. This right here on the screen is the analytics maturity model, which essentially just refers to the 4 different levels of data analysis. And as you can see, the lowest level descriptive analytics is the least difficult, but it's also the least valuable. Whereas as we go through all the way up to the top level, it becomes the most difficult, but the most valuable. That seems to be how life works, so makes sense. But yeah, so the first level of analysis is called descriptive analytics. And that answers the question of what happened. So to put it another way, descriptive analytics is the process of looking at data from the past and analyzing what happened there. So maybe you're looking at some sales data and you're looking at, in the past year, where different parts of your sales came from. That would be an example of descriptive analytics. And also included in descriptive analytics would be making visualizations. And then the second level is another step up, and that's diagnostic analytics. And that's answering the question of why did it happen? So we're not only looking at our sales data and figuring out where all of our different sales came from, we're looking at why that happened. And that, as you can probably guess, is a little bit more complicated. And that's where we start moving from information to insight. And then the third level is predictive analytics, which is asking the question of what will likely happen. Of course, we can't say with 100% certainty looking at past data what's going to happen in the future, but sometimes we can get pretty darn close, and it's a lot more effective than making just random guesses like people used to do in businesses in the olden days. And then finally, we have prescriptive analytics, which is where we move from insight to innovation. So it's the most difficult part, but it's also the most valuable part. And that answers the question of what would be the best to happen. So maybe if we're looking at our sales data again, we're looking at all of our sales data and we're saying our company should do XYZ marketing campaign in order to optimize sales in the future. So that would be an example of prescriptive analytics. So yeah, these are like the 4 levels. Today, we're really focusing on descriptive analytics, but as you dip your toes into analytics more and more, you'll probably start to see some of these later stages in the analytics maturity model. All right, before we move over to Excel, are there any questions on what we just covered in terms of like what data analysis is, what data analytics is, or any of the other things?
I had a question in regards to the recording in the PowerPoint slides. Will we have access after the class ends to look back at any point?
Yes, I can definitely send out the slides afterwards.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Okay, I will go ahead and move on, but of course, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. It's so fun. So the data set we're going to be working with today, and don't worry, you don't have this yet. I'm going to give it to you in a second, but it's a data science salaries data set, and we are going to obtain this data from a resource called Kaggle. So let me just go to the next screen really quick. Okay, so basically Kaggle is an online data science community that has tons and tons of free data sets that you can practice with. So if you are having fun with what we're doing today and want to go explore some of that on your own afterwards, they have so many data sets in all different kinds of categories. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. And they also have competitions that you can participate in with data, and they have communities that you can discuss questions with and things like that. So now what I'm going to do is actually go to this website, and I would encourage you to follow along with me so we can download this data set together. But if at any point you get lost, don't worry, because I'm also going to send the data set in the chat. But this is just something I would encourage you to do if you're able to on your laptop, just to get some practice with downloading a data set for free from Kaggle. Okay, I'm going to open up my little Chrome tab. Can everybody see my Chrome?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm going to type in Kaggle, KAGGLE.com. Let me just admit this person really quick and hit enter. So if everyone wants to go to Kaggle, KAGGLE.com, and it takes me to this home page. I'm going to wait just a few seconds in case maybe you were like flipping between windows or anything like that. Okay, is anybody not ready for me to move on? All right, I'm going to move on. But if at any point you get lost, don't worry, because I will send this data set in the chat. So now what I'm going to do is, if you see up here in this like top right like search bar, I am going to search for data science job salaries. It's data science job salaries. And then it's going to be this first one right here that has like the little person with like the purple bubble in the back, and it looks like they're on a computer. It was published 10 months ago. It's called Data Science Job Salaries. I'm going to click on that. And on this window, I'm just going to take a second to give a shout out to these things on the right. Here you can see on the left, we have some competitions, which is just like they'll provide a data set and then you get to go do your own thing, maybe build a model. There's different levels ranging from beginner to advanced, where you can just practice your skills and get some feedback. We have all of these data sets where we can just type in basically any category we want and just get a free data set. There's models where you can look at people's models based on this data. Code, which is the same thing, just with like code, so you can see the code that people have done to analyze this data. And then there's also like a discussions tab where if you have a question about anything, you can just ask it and people will answer it for you for free. So yeah, it's a really, really great resource. And I would highly encourage you to make an account. Is everybody good? Are we all on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I'm just going to kind of show you around this screen really quick, just so you understand how to use this website in the future. But essentially here at the top, we have this data card, which gives us a summary of the different columns that are going to be on our data set. So for example, we have the work year, we have the experience level, employment type, etc. I'm going to go into that a little bit more. But the part that I wanted to call out here is that it gives you an explanation of the different values that you're going to see in the data. So for example, in the experience level column, in the Excel spreadsheet, you are going to see like EN as a value. And you might be wondering, what does EN mean? Well, here it tells you it's entry level. Like SE means senior level, things like that. So it just gives you an idea of what's actually included in the data set. And then if you scroll down and you see like this dssalaries.csv, and you see this little download button right here, that's what you want to click on. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to ask you to sign in with Google or your email. I'm just going to sign in really quickly. But I think I already have my information saved in here, so I'll give you a second in case you don't. I think at this point it probably makes me download it again, so I'm going to scroll down to this little box down here that says dssalaries.csv and download it, because probably when I signed in, it made me reset that. And then it pops up here. I'm just going to give everyone 1 second to do that.
So are we gonna use Kaggle after this, or can I just close it out?
You can go ahead and close it out. Thanks for the question. Okay, is everybody at a point where they can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see
Perfect.
it.
Awesome. And if you don't have the data set, don't panic. I will send it in the chat in just a second. I just want to show you something really important first. So if everyone could just look at my screen. Here in this yellow ribbon, you probably see possible data loss. Some features might be lost if you save this workbook in the CSV format. We don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is click Save As. It's going to bring up this window. Let me just admit this person. It's going to bring up this window. And I'm just going to rename mine really quick. Workshop data. And on the Save As type, I'm just going to change it from the CSV in this little dropdown to an Excel workbook. And that's going to make sure that our changes are saving as we are doing all of these analytics things. So Save As type is Excel workshop. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to stop my screen share really quick so I can just put this this spreadsheet into the chat. Let me just do that really quickly. I'm not seeing an option to share the file in the chat. Let me just admit a few people really quick. Sorry, guys. Oh, thank you so much, Mary. So everybody, if you just click on that link, you can go ahead and get the data there. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think maybe the settings of this meeting don't allow the share of like actual files. Okay, so I will go ahead and reshare my screen. Oh, I see I've been mentioned in the chat. Let me just take a look at that. Oh, thank you. Okay. So is everybody able to see my Excel screen again?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Thank you. And is anybody panicking because they don't have the data set? Okay, I see we have a hand raised. Is there a question?
My data set didn't download like that. So can I just copy and paste it and enter it in?
How did your data set download?
It was just on the screen. It didn't actually it just was on a blank screen with all the information.
Okay, let me go back to my Kaggle website. So did you click this little button right here?
Yes.
And then once you clicked that, did it like pop up in the corner with the file?
No.
Hmm.
I'll try again though. Hold on.
Okay. Make sure you're not pressing this black one because sometimes the black button at the top that says download will download some other files with it. So make sure you're doing like this little one down here in the white box. All right, I'm going to keep going, but I think the TA is on this call. So if there's any confusion there, we can definitely figure it out. Don't worry. So here is the data that we're going to be using today. The first thing that you probably notice is that a lot of these cells are kind of bleeding together just because of the formatting. So I'm going to want to make it a little bit nicer so we can read it. So what I'm going to do, and feel free to follow along, but also it might be easier if at this point you're just kind of like watching what I'm doing and maybe taking some notes, because we will have practice problems later. Okay, so in the top left, in between this A and this 1, there's a little gray triangle, and I'm going to click it. And when I do that, the entire spreadsheet is selected. Then what I'm going to do is in between this A and this B, or really just any of these cells up here in the little heading with all of the letters, I'm going to put my cursor in between those letters until I see this little black cursor, and I'm going to double click. And what that does is just format this more nicely so that I can actually see all of these words and understand them. It's not important if you're not able to do that. It's just something I like to do to make sure that all of you can read what's on my screen. And I just wanted to show you a fun little Excel trick to get started. So yeah, now what I want to do is something that I always do when I'm looking at a new data set, and something I would really encourage all of you to always do when you're looking at a new data set, which is look at the data before we start with any analysis. So what I want to know is, what are all of these columns, and what do they mean, and what do these values mean, and how many rows are there, and things like that.
Can I ask a question on like the first column?
Go for it.
Is it supposed to be like IDs? Is that why it's blank and doesn't have anything?
Yes, these are the IDs, so it's just kind of like numbering the rows in this data set, but it's not important. Good question. Okay, so yeah, we already had the question of what does this first column mean answered, which is basically nothing. It's just a counter for these rows. So let's go ahead and look at the other columns. We have the work year, which it looks like we have the year 2020. I'm just scrolling down so I can see 2021. And this is going too slow, so I'm going to use the little thing on the right. And 2022. And it looks like it's just from 2021 to 2022. So that's pretty useful because now we know that we have exactly, let me just make sure I've saved my file correctly. Yes, okay, just confirming. Now we know that we have exactly 3 years of data. The next column we have is experience level. And again, when I see this MI and SE and EN, I'm like, what is that? I have no idea what that is. So that's when I go back to Kaggle and I look at this little data dictionary right here where I'm reminded, okay, EN is entry level, MI is mid level, EX is executive level. So if you see values that you don't know what they are, the great thing about Kaggle is that we can always go back here and be reminded. For employment type, it looks like we have full-time, it looks like we have contract, part-time, and freelance. For a job title, it looks like there's a bunch of job titles like data scientist, machine learning scientist, big data engineer, product data analyst. So that's really cool. We have a bunch of jobs here. We have the salaries for all of these jobs. And then we have salary currency. So it looks like we have euro, US dollar, the British pound, and a bunch of other currencies, which indicates that these jobs are taking place in different countries. And then we have, as we can see, the salary in US dollar, which is just the conversion of the salary from its original currency into US dollars. And so this column, column H, is going to be pretty useful for us as we're trying to make comparisons between these different salaries. We have the employee residence, we have the remote ratio, and when I see a remote ratio, initially I'm like, what is the remote ratio? What does that mean? And so when I go back to Kaggle and I hit view more and I scroll down, I can see that the remote ratio is the overall amount of work done remotely. The possible values are 0, 50, and 100. So that's pretty useful. We have the company location and we have the company size of small, medium, and large. And then the other thing I always do is scroll down to the bottom and I see that there are 608 rows here. And we know that the top row is kind of like this dummy row, which just has the headers. So there's 607 people that are contained in this data set. Are there any questions?
I had a question on, is it possible to use the feature that you did to select all to find like nulls and dashes and stuff like that?
The feature where I like selected all.
Yeah, and then possibly I think there's a way to like find all the nulls with Control F or find all the dashes or stuff like that.
Yes, yes, we can use the Control F. So for example, if we want to find like a dash, like we can do that in here using this. I don't actually think there are any dashes in this data set, so it's not going to bring anything up. But yes, you can basically hit this arrow right here and do a Control F, which if you're not familiar with that is just basically a shortcut for the search feature, which will help you search for all of those things. If you don't want to use the shortcut, you can also hit Find and Select right here.
Thanks. That comes in when like you're cleaning. I think this data set's cleaner than most, right?
This data set is much cleaner than what most data sets look like. It's pre-cleaned.
Thanks.
Yes. Any other questions? That was a great question, by the way. Okay.
Someone did have their hand up, so.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Does someone have their hand up? I'm not really able to see the Teams window because I'm sharing my screen. So thank you. No? Oh, yes.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, are all the data sets in Kaggle cleaned? Or like,
No, that's a
no?
great question. A lot of them are not cleaned. So maybe even a keyword you could include in your search is like clean data set or something like that. A lot of them are cleaned, but a lot of them aren't because sometimes it's good to get some practice with cleaning the data. Which if you're not familiar with what cleaning data is, it basically just means sometimes the data will have different formats and missing values and it's like really, really messy. So the process of making the data usable is called cleaning the data.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I think we had one more hand raised. Yes. I think there's a question.
Yeah, I believe, but I'm not sure someone else had their hand up, but I wanted to wait and see. I couldn't see the other name. I just wanted to know, do they prefer, because I think with the data dictionary, aside from you clicking back and forth, I think they made us add it to like a tab in Excel. So at the
Oh, you
start,
have the data dictionary in a tab?
from what I remember, I think they wanted us in the past. What is your recommendation on that? For anyone who opened the file so they could see it, you would copy and paste like the dictionary and create a tab for that for when you turned in this Excel file.
Yes. Wait, when you say they and turn in, what exactly are you
School,
referring to?
school.
Oh, for school. Yeah, it depends. For school, it just depends on like your professor or teacher and like their preferences. It definitely is good practice to keep in another tab the data dictionary, just so people who are using your file know what it is. But for the sake of today's workshop, we don't need to worry about that.
Okay. And I don't know if you could show this feature. I believe there's a way to hold the headers while you scroll, if you could show that at some point.
Yes, there is a way to hold the headers while we scroll. That is like a little bit more advanced than like what we're doing like right now, but like during the break, I can show you how to do that.
Thanks.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and get started. And what we're going to get started doing is some basic analytics in Excel. If you've already done this before, don't worry because we will move on to some different things. But I just want to make sure like whether you've used Excel a lot before or whether you've literally never opened Excel before, we're all kind of at like a good starting point for analytics. And the way that we're going to do that is by talking about some basic functions. And so functions in Excel are just equations or formulas that we're going to use on a daily basis as we use Excel. And they help you accomplish a majority of the tasks that you're going to be using in Excel. So for example, a function can help you analyze data using sums or averages or minimums or maximums or medians or anything like that. And Excel makes functions really easy for us because, for example, and you don't have to do this in your file, I'm just going to do this here to show you. But the way that we start a function is always with the equal sign. We always need to do the equal sign. So for example, we could say 1 plus 2 plus 3. And if this is slow for you, don't worry, we're going to move on. But I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page here. So that's going to give us 6 when I hit enter. But to use a function, I would say equals, and I'm going to use the sum function because that adds things up. I'm going to open my parentheses because that's how we start the function. And I am going to say 1 And as we can see in this little pop-up right here, Excel is telling us exactly how these functions work. So it's saying when we have sum, we want the parentheses, and then we want each number separated by a comma. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to close my parentheses and hit enter. And as you can see, it does the same thing. So when I click on this cell, I can see the formula here of equals sum 1, 2, 3 is the same, as saying equals 1 plus 2 plus 3. So I'm just going to delete those cells really quickly. I just wanted to show you kind of the difference between entering something like equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 and using an actual like defined basic function in Excel. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is go through some of these examples of functions, and I'm just going to share on my screen a few questions with you guys. Because I always like to frame analytics in terms of questions that we're trying to solve so that it makes a little bit more sense and it's contextualized. So can everybody see this picture?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So we are going to focus right now. You can ignore all of the bottom ones. We're going to focus on question number 1 under basic functions, which says how many employees are in the data set. So the function that I'm going to use to solve that is the count function. So I'm just going to type count right here in cell N2, which just refers to column N and row 2. So when I'm going to count the employees in this data set, something that's important to know is that the count function only counts numbers. It does not count words. So for example, if I am going to count, let's say, don't do this. I'm just going to show you how not to do it first so you don't make this mistake. So if I'm going to say equals count, which counts the number of something, open parentheses, and let's say I want to count the data science, machine learning scientist, and big data engineer. And as you can see, the way that when I select these cells inside of my function, Excel interprets that as E2. This colon means through. So anytime you see this colon, think through E4. So E2 through E4, I'm going to close that parentheses. It's going to give me 0, even though there's 3 things, because none of them are numbers. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, let's just get back to the question at hand. I just wanted you guys to know that so you didn't freak out maybe if you were counting something and get the number 0. So when I'm doing this problem, I'm going to say equals count, open parentheses, and for example, I could count any column as long as it's a number because any column as long as the values inside of it are numbers, because as we know, every row corresponds to a person. So I'm going to select inside my parentheses for the count, let's say cell F2, which has the first salary. And I am just going to scroll all the way down while still selecting that, all the way down until row 608. Okay. I will close my parentheses and I will hit enter. And as you can see, we get 607, which means there's 607 employees in this data set. Is everybody clear? Or are there any questions about how I got to that number? Okay, perfect. I'm going to go back to my little picture. So the second question we're going to ask is, what is the sum of all of the employees' salaries in US dollars? So the sum of all of the salaries in US dollars. So here I'm just going to type sum, just for your reference, and I'm going to use the sum function. So equals sum, open parentheses, and I'm going to look at this column H where we have salaries in US dollars. And I'm going to do basically the same thing I just did for count. I'm going to select cell H2, the first salary, and I am going to drag all the way down to the bottom until row 608. I will close my parentheses and hit enter, scroll back up, and I get this really big number. And I don't know about you, but unless I have the commas, I am not able to read a number because my brain doesn't work like that. So what I'm going to do is click on this cell. I have it in O3, the one that I have my answer in, and I am going to go up to this number ribbon and click on the $sign right here, which is going to format this number for me in dollars. And so from that, I can see that the sum of all of the salaries in US dollars is $68,164,807. That's a lot of money. All right, we're going to move on to the next function.
I just wanted to ask, is there like a better way to select all of those rows without dragging down and without writing the actual row numbers in there?
Yeah, I think the quickest way to do it is kind of what you just said of writing in the row numbers. So for example, we know that row 2 is the first row number we want to include, and we know that row 608 is the last one we want to include. So what we can do is just say equals sum H2 through H608, close it, and hit enter.
Sweet, thanks.
Yep. I was just kind of dragging it just to show in case like people are new to Excel.
Makes sense.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for the great question. So the third question here is, what is the average salary of all of these employees in US dollars? That's going to be the, oh, sorry, I can't type, the average function. So I'm going to say equals average, open my parentheses, and I'm just actually going to use the same column because we want to take an average of the salaries in US dollars. And I'm going to use the approach that our friend just suggested instead of dragging all of those. And I'm going to say H2 through, the colon is through, H608, close my parentheses, hit enter. Again, that is a quite big number. And so I am going to click on that cell, come up to this number ribbon, hit the dollar sign, and I can see that the average salary for data professionals in this data set is $112,297.87. That's pretty good. Okay, I will move on to the next question. The next question we have here is, what is the minimum remote ratio and what is the maximum remote ratio? So as you can probably guess by now, we are going to be using the minimum and the maximum function. So I will here type min, and my function is going to be equals min. It's not minimum, it's min. And the way we know that is when we start typing in these words, as you can see, Excel pops up with all of these different options. So it's like, do you want nominal? Do you want min A, min ifs? But no, I just want min. If you type in minimum, it's not going to recognize that as a function. And so I'm going to say equals min. I will open up my parentheses and I will select cell J2 because that's the beginning of remote ratio. I will drag it all the way down to row 608. Okay. I will close my parentheses, hit enter, and I get that the minimum is 0. You're probably not shocked because we can already see in this very first row that there is a 0. I just wanted to kind of give you an example of how to use the minimum function. And then very similarly, we have the max function, which is equals max, not maximum, equals max. So equals max, open parentheses. We can do that same trick again where we just type it in instead of dragging all of that because dragging can get kind of annoying. So I'm going to say equals max of the range from J2 through J608. I will close my parentheses. As you can see, when I typed that in, Excel already highlighted this for me. It's very smart. And we can see that the maximum is 100. And that also makes sense because we can see that we have 100 right here, and the data dictionary told us that that was the maximum value. So right here, I already have some pretty cool summary statistics, and that's just using very, very basic functions. As you can probably guess, things can get a lot more complicated when we start using more complex functions. But these are just some of the very basic ones that you're going to use probably very frequently. Are there any questions about anything I just covered or anybody who's lost or needs some clarification? I'm just going to wait a second for any questions. Okay. In that case, we can go ahead and move on. And we can discuss something a little bit more complicated, which is a pivot table. Has anybody heard of a pivot table?
Yes.
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 Awesome. Okay. In that case, I'll just explain it in case maybe some people haven't heard what it is. Awesome. Awesome. But it's really great that a lot of you have heard of it and maybe even have used them before. But essentially, a pivot table is just a table that we can create from this big data set that allows us to extract some significance from a large, detailed data set. So for example, we can use it to more quickly find counts and sums and averages and minimums and maximums, and we can filter data and we can sort the data. And it's really, really useful for that. And so we are going to start actually creating some pivot tables. So at this point, sorry, just give me one little second. Let me just pull up these questions again. So the first question we're going to explore with pivot tables is, what is the average salary? Oh, I see we have a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so I was trying to ask a question earlier, but I'm not sure if it's late for that. I just imported the data from Kaggle, and what I have wanting to ask was that the data that I have exported in Excel, or first I imported it and now I have exported it the other way, but the format is really off. I just want to know how to fix the format because it just shows me first it opened in Google Sheets, and then when I imported it in Excel, it's kind of putting it all in one column, and if I exported it, it's kind of showing me just a tabular form, but there is no grid after that. It's kind of not looking like really it's Excel, but it's in Excel, but it's the format is off. Do you know how to fix it?
Okay, so you do have like the actual app Microsoft Excel installed on your computer, right?
Yes, actually this one is Excel. Yeah, Microsoft Excel, but maybe it is like kind of like maybe it's in the browser. Maybe that's why. Like I'm using the
You're
cloud.
using, oh, okay. So you're using the online version of Microsoft Excel?
I believe maybe that's why I have, yeah, that could be the problem. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Do you happen to have the desktop version of Excel?
Yeah, I can try downloading in that and see if I can get the format back.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, and then just one other thing is, let me reshare my screen really quickly.
Okay.
All right, so when you are looking at downloading the data set on Kaggle, I'm just gonna scroll down. You're hitting this button, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then once it downloaded, let me just go through that process one more time very quickly. I open this data set. When it opened, if you had this ribbon that was yellow, did you save it as an Excel file instead of a CSV?
No, I haven't done that.
Okay, so when you try it in the desktop version, if you see this yellow ribbon, make sure that you hit the Save As, and in this little drop down, you change it to an Excel workbook, and maybe that could help your formatting too.
Okay, I'll try that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Were there any other questions?
I had a quick question going back to a quicker way to do the formulas and stuff. Since you said it doesn't read, text and whatnot, if you do like just a full column, it skips the text once you do it again. Like J to J or the whole column.
Right. Are you saying it skips the like words and it only counts the numbers?
Yeah, it just does the numbers automatically. You don't have to key in the 602. Once you do it once, it starts to remember and just does it. Probably not the best, but yeah.
Yes, that's because, like I said, and that's a great catch, because when you're using the count function, it's only going to count numeric values. It's not going to count those words or those letters. And so that is definitely a shortcut. Just for the sake of showing how functions work, I didn't do that, but that's a really great catch.
I don't know if you can go over it. I remember something with dollar signs, since we were using some of the same columns again and again. I think that was another shortcut. Like, I think it was F4, where you can hold the same column again, possibly.
Yes. That's in terms of referencing cells, which we haven't done today yet. But if you have a question about that after the workshop, I can definitely answer that. Cool. All right. So it is I believe it's 10 a.m. Pacific time right now. And so I think we're going to take a 10-minute break. Yasmin, if you're on the call, I'm not sure if you wanted to do the poll at the beginning of the break or at the end of the break.
Yeah, let them take a break, come back, and I'm just going to post the poll on the chat, and they can feel free to do it.
That sounds great. I'm just going to share my screen with a little like countdown timer for 10 minutes, just so you guys know if you're looking back at your computers how much time we have left. So I will go ahead and share my screen and do that, and I'll see you back in 10 minutes.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're seeing the poll on your screen. Um, it would really help us to understand, among the 50 plus people that are here as to, who's interested in a coding bootcamp. And we can actually, get in touch with you if you just let us know. And it's a very simple poll. And I think I see Sabia here asking, will the coding bootcamp help us start career in data analytics? I'll let Melanie actually answer that question, but I can definitely say from the administrative side that there have been a lot of people who have taken the courses and have been able to get into a job. Data analytics jobs have been plenty, and it's has been a little easier. I mean, easier in the sense that I think if I were to compare to, say, a full stack or a software engineering job, I think data analyst jobs have been a little more easier to get into. And I'll let Melanie, talk about that. So if you could, you know, you know, do this poll, I'd really appreciate it. Just gives us a little bit more glimpse as to who's interested, who's not, and then we don't need to bother you. Thank you.
Yes, and just to give a little bit more detail on whether the coding bootcamp will help you start a career in data analytics, the answer is yes. One of the greatest things about this coding bootcamp is that you can learn some of the more technical skills such as Excel and Power BI and Python and things like that that are going to give you a really, really big boost in terms of starting a career in data analytics, because the companies maybe that you're applying for or just whatever organization you're interested in getting involved in will see that you've made effort to learn these new technologies and can learn quickly. And that's really, really useful.
Where is the poll located? That might have slipped away during the time it was posted.
It's in the chat. If you scroll up just a little bit, there's a pollie. It was at 7:04. Good question. Thank you.
Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, it looks like we only have 13 people who have voted, but we have 46 people on this call. So maybe if you can scroll up in the little chat and find 7:00. Sorry, I'm in a different time zone. I think it's 10:04 a.m. For you guys.
You're fine. I work with Arizona, so it's always, and they're on their own little time zone at times, so it's fine for me.
All right, we're all over the world right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started again. I will go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to keep working on Excel. As I mentioned, we're going to start working in pivot tables. Sorry, that's my time. I don't know if you guys could hear that. It was blasting through my headphones. Okay, back to Excel.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Playing with the data, well, you're playing with the data. Did you want us to not follow along because we may be pulling it over into Tableau later?
Yeah, so this data, you can always re-download the data if you're going to use it in Tableau later. You are very welcome to follow along and do this on your computer, or you can just follow along on my screen and watch me and take some notes, whatever's more useful to you, because you will have the recording. So if you want to practice along with me later, that's great too.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to move into pivot tables, which, as I mentioned, are just ways to get a lot of significance out of this data very quickly and very easily. So I am just going to put up this little picture on the screen again, where we have some practice questions. And the first question, oh, it looks like it went away. Let me open that up again. Practice questions. All right, so under pivot tables, the first practice question we're going to talk about is, what is the average salary in US dollars by job title? So what this means is, for every job title that's listed in our data, we want to know the average salary in US dollars for that job. We can ignore the second part of the question for now. We're just going to deal with the first part right now. So if I want to make a pivot table, what I want to do is select anywhere in my table. We don't want to select anywhere outside the table. We want it to be in the data that we were provided, just any cell, it doesn't matter. And up here, you're going to see the Insert tab. I'm going to click on this Insert tab. And then on the very left, you can see Pivot Table. And there's this little icon here. I'm going to click on that icon. And as you can see, it highlights the entire table. So it already highlights this table range. We don't want to mess with that. And it says, choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. I want it to be placed in a new worksheet because including it in this worksheet is going to be way too confusing. So once I've done that, I'm going to hit OK. And I'm brought to my new worksheet. Is anybody lost at this point? All I did was I was in here, I selected anywhere in the table, I hit insert, pivot table, and then I hit OK. All right. In that case, yeah, so my question is, what is the average salary in US dollars by job title? And something I just wanted to show you all really quickly is, let's see, this pivot table guide that I made for you. Can you all see my pivot table guide?
Yes.
Yes, we can see
Yes.
it.
Perfect. So in Excel, as you can see over here, we have some, it says drag fields between areas below, and there's 4 different categories. And I found that sometimes it can be confusing to remember which column or like what we drag into each of these categories. And so I made you a little guide, and I can also send this out to you afterwards. But in filters, we're just going to drag anything that we want to filter the data by. In columns, we're going to drag date and times. In rows, we're going to drag non-numeric fields, so anything that's not a number. And in values, we're going to drag numeric fields. So that's just kind of like a good way to remember what we're going to drag where. And again, I will send this out to you. And we're going to do some practice right now, so it'll probably get easier to remember. So when we're looking at the average salary by job title, we know that our non-numeric field, or the one that's not a number, is our job title. So I'm going to grab job title right here, and I'm going to drag it, oops, I grabbed the wrong one, job title, and drag it down to rows because that's not numeric. And as we can see, the rows of our pivot table have been made job title. So we have 3D computer vision researcher, AI scientist, etc. But now that's useless because all we have is a list of job titles. I guess not useless, but not all that useful. So we want to see what the average salary is for each of those job titles. So I'm going to go to my salary in USD field. I'm going to drag it down to values because it's a number. And now, as you can see, I not only have each job, but I have the sum of salary in US dollars for each job. But can anybody see what the problem is if what I'm trying to find is the average salary in US dollar for each row? If anyone wants to unmute and say what the problem is with this table.
It's the sum.
Exactly, perfect. Yes. So Excel in the pivot table will automatically choose a way to make a calculation, and it's chosen sum, but that's not super useful for us. So what we do to change it from sum to average, like our friend just shared with us, is click in any of these numbers in the sum of salary in USD column, click on any cell in there, right click, go down to summarize values by. So we right click on a number, summarize values by, and go down to average. I'm going to click on that. Now that's useful. Now we have for each job, we have the average salary in US dollars. Are there any questions about how I did that?
No.
Yes, can you redo it?
Redo it?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Okay, I'm just going to drag this back really quick and redo it. So we're just trying to find the average salary in US dollars by job title. So I'm going to select job title right here. I'm going to drag it down to my rows because that is the non-numeric field. I'm going to get my salary in US dollars. I will drag it down to values. Now we have each job title and we have the sum of salaries in US dollars. But we don't want the sum of salary in US dollars. We want the average salary in US dollars. So I'm going to click on any of these numbers here in this column B. I will right click, hit summarize values by. It's selected sum right now, but I'm going to go down 2 and hit average. And now I have the average salary in US dollars for each job title. Any more questions on that?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so in that case, I'm going to go back to our little picture here where we have our questions. Oh my gosh, I don't know why it keeps doing that. There's definitely something to show there. Let me just open it up again to our practice questions. So now the second question here on number 1 is, what if we want to filter the data to only include US companies? So if you remember in our little pivot table guide, we're going to put anything we want to filter the data by in this filters box. So let's filter by company location. So I'm going to hit
I had a
company.
question.
Yes, go for it.
If we wanted to change the format to the way you had it for the currency for the block, would we
Mhm.
have to go back to the original sheet, or could we change it from here?
Yes. Let me admit somebody really quickly. You can change it from here. So if you go back to the home tab and you click on these numbers and then hit this $sign right here, it'll change it. Or you can just select, let me just Control Z really quickly. If you select column B, you can hit this $sign here to change it to the accounting format, and that will put it in dollars.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I'm just going to undo that though for now. Also, if at any point you click somewhere and this little ribbon in the right goes away, don't panic. Just click back into your pivot table and it'll pop up again. Alrighty. So now we are going to deal with filters. So now that we want to, as the question, is there something in the chat? Sorry, I can't see the chat right now. I will take that as a no. All right, so we know we want to filter to US companies. So we're going to use this company location field and drag it down to filters. And as you can see, in row 1, this little company location filter came up. So if we click on this little drop down, we can see all the different countries in this data set. U is at the bottom, so I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to hit US right here. And I'm going to hit OK. And my screen just changed, as you can see, because now this is only the average salaries in US dollars for the rows, for the job titles, for the data that has the US company location. And that's how a filter works. We basically just drag whatever we want to filter the data by down to filters. We go to this little drop down, we select what we want, and we hit OK. Is everybody good on that? Are there any questions? Okay, perfect. In that case, let's try another example. So as you can see in my practice questions for pivot tables number 2, my question is, what is the average salary in US dollars for each job title for each year? So it's basically the same thing as number 1, but we've added in for each year. So I'm going to go back to my Excel. We could technically do it in this tab, but I'm just going to leave it here so we can practice redoing it again. So I'm going to go back to my original file, click anywhere in the data set, hit Insert, hit Pivot Table. All of this is fine. I'm going to hit OK. We have a new pivot table. Just to remind you, what we first did was grab job title, and we dragged it down to rows because it's not numeric. We grabbed salary in US dollars. We dragged it all the way down to values because it is numeric, but we have the sum here. So we're going to click any of these numbers. I'm going to right click, hit summarize values by, and change it to the average. If I'm going too fast or too slow, just let me know. So now that I have the average salary in US dollars for each row, what we want is the average salary in US dollars, for each job title for every year. And does anybody remember where the date and time values go in these 4 boxes? Does anybody remember?
Columns.
Exactly. Yes, perfect. You guys are amazing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to work year, and I'm going to drag it to columns. Amazing. Now we have the average salary in US dollars for each of these jobs for every year. And that was a lot easier than using a bunch of Excel formulas to do that, because it would have taken a lot. Another thing just to note is when we add in these columns, it adds a grand total column. And sometimes that's useful, sometimes it's not. If you want to get rid of it, all you have to do is click on this grand total, right click, and hit remove grand total. But you don't have to. It's just up to your preference. I just wanted to show you that in case that would be useful for you. Are there any questions about this one? The only difference between the first one we did and this pivot table is that now we've added in the work year in columns, so we can see the average salary for each job title for every single year. Any questions?
So I have a question. In order to do these pivot tables, or when you're asking specific questions, are you just continuing to create a different pivot table every time? Or is it something that you could just continue to build on into this sheet?
That is an amazing question. Yes, you can. So for example, the only difference between my sheet 1 and my sheet 2, well, first of all, I don't have the filter in sheet 2, but I just added in work year for columns. I could just do that on sheet 1. I could just drag work year down to columns. I'll just show you that. We can do that. That's perfectly fine. The only reason I made a new one is just to show you like my results for each of these different practice questions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
This might be outside the scope, but I'm wondering if you can take the pivot table and just get it to generate a chart right next to it, if possible.
Yes, you can. You definitely can. I was going to cover that at the end, but let me just do it now. If you want to generate a chart from, actually, no, let me just leave that for the end because I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves. But yes, we will cover how to do that. And Excel is really great at doing that. Good question. Good question.
I did have another. Is there a way to like keep multiple pivot tables inside one sheet, or would you have to spread them out throughout new sheets for what
Yeah,
we're doing?
you can put multiple in one sheet. So for example, if you're in this original data set and you hit insert pivot table, you can specify whether you want it to go to an existing worksheet or a new worksheet. It's just easier and cleaner usually to put them in new worksheets.
I have a question, please. So I'm having an issue with my own data set and my pivot table. So instead of bringing out the options as the titles of like the document, like, you know, where yours says work here, experience level and all, mine is bringing out the second row just after that.
Oh,
you know, so it's bringing
random
out
numbers?
the values. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, so when you made your pivot table and you clicked first of all like anywhere inside the table, right? On the original data, and then you hit insert pivot table. When you clicked that next to table/range, what is the what is the range that it provided for you in that?
Okay, let me check.
Perfect.
I had to change mine when I was following along with you. It went to that block on the right.
I'm thinking maybe that's what it did, right? We want it to say the DS salaries. Mine says 4 years, probably doesn't. I just have a lot of these files saved to my computer. But the DS salaries, exclamation point, and then B1, and then L608 is what we want it to say.
Okay, mine says the DS salaries and then A2 and N608.
A2. Okay, yeah. So what you want to change it to is change it to in the range. Let me just actually or can you see my screen where it has the range that I have?
Yeah, I see.
Can you just copy that range into yours? It's the $B, $1, colon, $L, $608.
Okay, let me take a picture and then.
Sounds good. And that should fix your problem.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on then. So now we're going to say, we're going to do number 3, which is what is the count of each job title for each state? So what is the count? We're not doing average now, we're doing count of each job title for each state. So I'm going to go back here to my original table, hit insert, pivot table. We want the range to be B1 through L608. That's important because if it's not that range, it's not going to do all of this magic and make it really nice for us. New worksheet, okay, I just didn't mess with this, but if for whatever reason it's messing with your numbers, make sure it says B1 through L608. I'm going to hit OK. Let me just remind myself of the question. The count of each job title for each state. Okay, perfect. So does anyone have any idea what the rows would be here?
Job title.
Perfect. Job title. So I'm going to grab job title and drag it down to rows. And let's see here, the count of each job title for each state. So now what I'm going to do is, because we have state, and we might think that state would go in columns, but only like years and dates and times will go in columns. So when we have each state, I'm going to do company location. I'm going to put this here. And sorry, I think state should say country. Sorry about that. That's why I was getting a little confused. So for each country. So we have the country here, and then under that we have the job title. So we're kind of nesting this. So we have like this country and their job titles, this country and their job titles, this country and their job titles. So we can nest things in rows to make them a little bit more complex. And then I'm going to move job title also to values, and it gives me the count of job titles. So for example, if, so here CH, that's China, we can see that there's 2 job titles in this data set that are in China, and it's the big data engineer and the data scientist, and there's 1 of each. So we just actually did a lot of calculations just by dragging 3 little columns down in 3 little fields down into these areas. This one was a little bit more complex. Sorry, I messed up the state versus country. It should just be country. Are there any questions on how I did this one? I just dragged job title down. We found the count of each job title, and then we nested in the company location so that we could see what the job title, all the job titles under each company location. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question if you don't mind, Melanie.
Go for it.
So underneath the values, for some reason, where did you get the field for count of job title? Because I didn't see that in my option of choices.
Great question. I'm going to drag it back and show you what I did. I took job title and I dragged it down, and Excel just knew I wanted the count of the job title. So for example, this doesn't make sense, but remember like earlier when we were doing it with salary and we would change it from like sum to average? Here, Excel already knows what we want, and it knows we want the count. And so it just gave us the count right here.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great question.
Hi, Melanie, I have a question. So can we do this pivoting of table in the single sheets? The same sheet?
Sorry, can we do the what in the same sheet?
I mean, we did a couple of pivot tables here, right? So can we do it in the same Excel sheet, not in multiple sheets?
Yeah, I think you can. I just think it's usually cleaner to do it in separate sheets like this.
Okay, because sometimes they would like to see, smaller tables and the related jobs or related, roles and stuff in the same table. So,
exactly.
Okay.
Great question. Yes, you can. I just like for the sake of making it like very clear and for you guys able to see my screen right now, I'm doing it in separate ones, but you can do that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Alrighty, I am going to move on to the last practice question that we're going to do all together. So the last question here is, for each company size, what is the number of companies for each remote ratio? So I'm going to go back. Let's make a new pivot table. So we're going to go back to our original data. We're going to hit insert, make sure we're clicked somewhere in the table, insert, pivot table, make sure that range is correct, hit OK. For each company size, what is the number of companies for each remote ratio? Alrighty. So does anyone know what the rows are going to be? Oh, sorry, I see we have a question. Maybe there's just a hand up from before, I'm not sure. Okay, does anybody know for this question number 4 right here, what the rows is going to be?
Company size?
Yes, exactly. Amazing. So we have company size, we have small, medium, and large here. So the question is, for each company size, what is the number of companies for each remote ratio? So we have company size in the rows. Also, we're going to count those company sizes. So we have 198 large companies, 326 medium companies, and 83 small companies. But we want to know for each remote ratio. So we're going to put remote ratio, we're going to take it and drag it down to rows and put it right on top of company size. And now we can see for the remote ratio 0, there are 127 companies. There's 32 large, 79 medium, and 16 small. And then we can see that for the other remote ratios too. And in the values, when we put company size there, it automatically guessed that we wanted count, so we didn't have to change that, which was really useful. Are there any confusions there or anything that anyone wants me to clarify? No?
I think even we can, I mean, just a tabular representation, we can even have the company size in the, I mean, column section as well. Remote ratio.
Yeah, theoretically we can. And if you want it in a tabular form, that works. In Microsoft's documentation, they usually say that columns is reserved for date and time hierarchies. But if, like, for instance, your manager wants it in this tabular form, you can absolutely do that.
Okay.
Great question. That was a great question. Or I guess comment. Alrighty, so before we move on, I do want to go back and address the question about the pivot charts. So there was a question asking, let's say we want a little chart to pop up next to this pivot table. How do we do that? So I'm going back to my sheet 1, and I'm going to just click on this chart. This is the one that was showing the average salary in US dollars for each job type. And I am going to click anywhere in this pivot chart. And then in the pivot table analyze ribbon up at the top, if you go all the way over to tools, you're going to see this little pivot chart button. So again, I'm going to click anywhere in my pivot table, go up to pivot table analyze, go over to pivot chart and click on it. And now, as you can see, it gives us all of these different options for charts that are basically pre-made for us. So let's say I just want like this one that it's suggesting. I'm going to hit OK. And boom, we have a graph that we didn't have to do anything to make, all because we had this pivot chart ready. Let me see here. And then if we go into the design tab, if you want to change the chart type, let's say we want like a pie chart is just really a terrible choice for showing this data. But let's just say for some crazy reason that we want a pie chart, we would just like change the chart type there by hitting under design, change chart type. But I'm going to change it back to this clustered column because I like it a lot better. Did that answer your question on that?
Yes, could you go over it again, going for what you selected at the top part?
Absolutely. Let me delete this and do it again more slowly. So we're in our pivot table, and we want to make our pivot table into a graph. I'm going to click anywhere in my pivot table. I'm going to go up to this top ribbon, go to the right. There's a green thing that says, when I click on my pivot table, there's a green option that says Pivot Table Analyze. I'm going to click there. And now I'm going to go over to the right where it says Tools. There's two options in Tools. One is Pivot Chart, and one is Recommended Pivot Tables. I'm going to hit Pivot Chart. It pops up with this Insert Chart tab with the data already selected. It pops up with this automatic one of clustered column. I like that, so I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm just going to drag it over. Did that clarify?
Yes. I might ask you about something later if you're going to handle it in the future, because I saw something in the tab talking about slicing, if you had the chance to go over that.
About slicing. Actually, that's exactly what I was going to talk about, so that works great.
It was under, like, when you did pivot chart analyze, there was something there that said slicing, I think.
Yes. This insert slicer?
Yeah, if you can go over slicing at any point today, it'll be great.
Absolutely. I will go over slicing right now. But just before I do that, does anybody else have any more questions about anything we've done with pivot tables? Okay, in that case, let's do some.
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Okay, so how do you know exactly how to position the values. Like for instance, when we wanted to do the last question for the question was how many for each company size, what is the number of companies for each remote ratio? How do you know, like on that rows, you know, remote ratio came first, then company size. Like how do you know how to arrange it? Because I initially did company size first and remote ratio underneath.
Like this?
Yes.
Yeah,
Is
so
that how
either
it
one is
is? Okay.
either one is valid. Your answer would not be
Okay.
wrong. It's just like a preference in terms of maybe like what makes it like more easy to communicate, so, like your results to somebody else and like what they're wanting to see. So for me, I would like to see, yeah, for each remote ratio, I want to see these different company sizes. But the way that you did it in terms of for each company size, you want to see these remote ratios, that works great too.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
Can you send the question screenshot so that we can use it to refer?
Send the questions in the chat?
Yeah.
Yes. Let me unshare my screen. I have it saved as a picture and I'm not able to like send files into the chat.
Maybe you can show.
Screen share the questions?
Yeah.
Okay, let me do that. Sorry about that, guys. Let me share my screen, pop up the pictures. Yeah, if you want to just like take out your phones or like take a screenshot of these questions, go ahead and do that while I have it up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is everybody good on that?
I had a question for as far as like if someone was to read the file, are you going to go over possibly later if like for this one with the small, medium, and large, if we had to change all the S, M's, and L's to that exact phrase? Small, medium, large.
If you wanted to change those to like the word small, medium, large.
Yeah, like we had numbers that had to represent like 1, 2, male, female, or if we had like, you know, M and S, change all those to the exact text. If you'll go over that at some point.
I wasn't planning on it, but let me just answer it. So what you would want to do probably is in the original file, just do a find and replace. Like you could just find anything that matched exactly L, not anything that includes an L, but anything that matched exactly L and replace it with large using the find and select.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question here. If we apply a conditional formatting, if you have like any example that we can put here and show the solution for conditional formatting.
Like, so
if the salary is above 80,000, then or else like this.
Right. Great question. So conditional formatting isn't part of what we're covering in the workshop today. It is part of the Intro to Data Analytics workshop that is starting in a few weeks. But at the end, like because it's not in the scope of what we're doing today, but at the end, if you want to stay after a little bit, we can definitely show you how to do conditional formatting in Excel. But it's also covered in our IDA course. You're welcome. Alrighty, so now I'm just going to take a minute to show you guys a really cool tool that somebody mentioned earlier, which is slicers. So I'm going to delete my pivot chart right now because I want this space to be clear. But when I want to insert a slicer, basically what a slicer is just a really nice, pretty filter. So if you remember, filters is what we want to filter the data by. A slicer is a really great way to do that. So how I want to insert a slicer is click anywhere in this pivot table, click Pivot Table Analyze, and click Insert Slicer. So again, I'm going to X out so you can see that. Anywhere in the pivot table, up at the top ribbon, in the green, we hit Pivot Table Analyze and Insert Slicer. So for example, in question 1, if you remember the second part of that question, it said like, what if we only want to see US companies? So let's say company location and okay. And now we have all of these company locations. And just to show you this, I'm just going to remove company location from my filters for the first one so I can show you how this really works. So again, I just removed that filter so we can see the slicer. But essentially what we have here, I'm going to make it a little bigger so you can see it, is all of these different company locations. So I'm going to scroll down, click US, and boom, my filter is already done. Or let's say I want to only select, I think DE is Denmark. So I'm going to like select only Denmark companies. And that's just a really nice way to make it interactive. So if you're sharing this spreadsheet with somebody and like you want them to be able to like see these average salaries for each job and like change it like based on like what information they want to see, like France, for instance, or like Mexico, they can just click on these values here and very quickly do it on their own without having to know how to use the filters. Does that make sense to everybody? Are there any questions?
That was great. Can you run through that one more time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for asking. I'm just going to delete this then. Okay, so first what I did was from question 1, I just removed that filter because basically a slicer is just a nicer filter. So I removed it so that I can show you how to use it. So we have job title in rows, an average of salary in US dollars in values. So I clicked anywhere in the pivot table, it doesn't matter where. Up at the top in this ribbon, I went to pivot table analyze in green. In the filter area of pivot table analyze, there's this little icon here that has like a little funnel kind of thing, and it says insert slicer. I clicked on that. And then you can choose anything you want to filter by. So for example, let's just do work year. Okay. So now I have this really awesome slicer where if I only want to show data from 2020, boom. Now it's only showing data from 2020 or only 2022, I can click there. If I want to show data from 2020 and 2022, what I do is I hit this little multi-select. If you hover over these 3 checks with the lines, it says multi-select. So now I can select 2020 and 2022, but not 2021. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. And then I think we had one more hand up.
Oh, it was me. I just wanted to know if we could select like 2 countries for the previous exercise, but I already figured out how to do it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Okay.
I had a question.
Uh-huh.
Only because you're mentioning other possible classes at the end, could you possibly give us a link or, discuss those other classes? Because you already mentioned coding and possibly intro to data analytics, which I'm interested in both.
That sounds great. And yes, we can definitely share the resources for that. The one I've been referring to, the Intro to Data Analytics, I'm actually teaching and it starts in May if you're interested in doing that. But we can definitely give you the resources and information about those courses. And we offer like multiple courses too. So there's more than just the Intro to Data Analytics, but kind of what we're covering today is a little sneak peek preview into the Data Analytics course. Okay. So we have about 13 minutes left before we're going to pivot over to do a small break and then do some visualizations in Tableau. So
we had another question in the chat by text.
Oh, could someone read it out to me since I can't see the chat?
Is there a limit on the number of slicers?
A limit on the number of slicers? That is a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that. Let's try and make another slicer. Salary. That is a wonderful question. As it seems, the answer is no. Also, yeah, that's a great approach. If you ever have a question about how to do something in Excel, just try it. So here, for example, I can select the salary of 8,000 and the work year of 2020, and we only have 1 row. So no, there is no limit to the number of slicers that you can do. Great question. Okay, so at this point, we have 12 minutes left until we're going to do a break and pivot over to Power BI. I have a few more practice problems for you. I just wanted to see, like, do you maybe want to try a few of them on your own and then like for like a few minutes and then come back and do the answers together? Or do you want to just keep doing it all together since we don't have very much time? If anyone wants to unmute and share their preferences.
I had a question on, because the email told us the 2 Tableau instead of Power BI.
Oh, did I say Power BI?
Yes.
Sorry, scratch that. I meant Tableau. Sorry about that. Yes, we're using Tableau today. Sorry about that.
No worries. I thought I downloaded the wrong program.
No worries, no worries. Yes, I see we have a hand up.
Yeah, so I was just wanting to answer the question that you had asked earlier. I would actually like to try to do one of these exercises kind of on our own just to see if we've actually grasped the information and then come back together if that's okay. I don't know if anybody else feels the same or not.
Yeah, awesome. You're the first person to share, so I think we'll just go ahead and, oh, we have one more hand up.
Hi, Melanie. I have a question. So,
yes.
In the future, probably, will you be able to have this kind of session for Power BI as well?
Yes, and you mean instead of Tableau?
Yeah.
Yes, in our Intro to Data Analytics course, the one that SkillSpire is doing that starts in May, we are actually going to do Power BI instead of Tableau. We just wanted to do Tableau today because it's a little easier to install and it's nice to know multiple tools.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, so now
the table that you put as in row columns, the data to be input, you have that slide. Can you put that in chat section?
Oh yes, the little pivot table guide. This one?
Yeah. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, do you want to maybe take a screenshot of it while it's up on my screen?
Yeah, you can put it in the chat or.
Yeah, I'm having trouble sharing files in the chat, but I can definitely also email this out afterward. I'll leave it up just if you want to take a screenshot and then I can email it out afterwards. Okay. So now we have 10 minutes left. So maybe what we can do is do one of the practice problems and then we can come back together. And when I say 10 minutes left, I mean until the break and until we pivot, not until the end of the workshop. But yeah, I'm going to pull up some questions. I have some practice questions prepared for you. I'm thinking maybe it might be more fun to practice pivot tables than practice basic. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong one. Project questions. I think it might be more fun to practice pivot tables than basic functions. So let's go ahead and do pivot tables practice question number 1, which says, what is the average salary in US dollars for each employment type where the remote ratio is 100%? So if you want to on your own, go ahead and start trying to make a pivot table for that. And then how about in 5 minutes, we'll come back and we will go over it together. Or if you guys are like done sooner, we can also go over it sooner. And also if you have any questions along the way, feel free to unmute and ask. Are there any questions about what we're going to be doing for the next 5 minutes? We're going to be doing this problem number 1. Maybe I can mark that on here. Oh my. It might be harder than I thought to paint on here. Yeah, problem number 1. What is the average salary in US dollars for each employment type where the remote ratio is 100%? And again, if you're confused or have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask. We're just doing this problem number 1 right here for pivot tables.
I have sent the screenshot. Is that correct?
Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat that?
I have done with the screenshot. Can you check that and correct me?
Yeah, we're going to go over what we did in about 2 minutes. Great question.
Thank you.
Can you go over how to do screenshots if some people aren't aware with keys?
Go over how to do screenshots on the computer?
Yeah, if some people aren't aware how to do screenshots.
Oh, great question.
Me and another person has been adding screenshots to the chat.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. If you're on a Windows computer to do a screenshot, and feel free to ignore me if you're working on your pivot table, but you just hit the little Windows key. I just type in like snipping tool. I select it, and then I just hit new, and I will like take a screenshot. I don't know if you can see that I just did that in Teams. But that's how you take a screenshot. Or you could just take a picture on your phone. All right.
Quick
Does
question:
anybody-
How do you change the How do you change it from sum to average if it's coming up like a summer count? Forgot how to do that.
Let's definitely go over that. And actually, I'll take that as a cue that we're ready to just go over the answer to this question. So we can actually just walk through it together. Does anybody actually like want to walk me through how they did it? We can do it on my screen, but you can just kind of guide me on what you did and we can go over it together. No takers?
I could try.
I can try it.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
All right. Anyone can try. It's cool. Or you can all work together. Anything is fine.
Okay, so the first thing that I did is that I took employment type and I dragged it to rows.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, I created the pivot table first. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so like the question was, which is the average salary per employment when ratio is 100? So the first thing that I did was that I took the employment type and I dragged it into rows.
Perfect. Let me just do that. Like this?
Yeah. The second step that I took is that I took the salary in US dollars and I dragged it into values. Okay, and after that, I convert that to average. And what I did is that there is like a little drop down there. And you are going to see value field settings. And I just selected average. Okay.
Average. Okay. And if that's confusing to you, just for those who are watching, it's because earlier I was clicking in this cell, I was right clicking, I was hitting summarize values by an average, but that's just another way to do the exact same thing. So thank you for pointing that out. Also, for just to pause really quick, for whoever had the question about how to change the sum to the average, did that answer your question?
I think I missed it, and because I was trying to do it the shortcut way, and I'm on a Mac, and so it's not coming up.
Gotcha.
So if you could give me the other way again.
Absolutely. Let me just drag my value back, and you can just watch me do it again. So I take this salary of US dollars. I'm going to drag it down to values. I'm going to go over to these numbers where it says the sum of salary in US dollars. I'm going to right click. Under this X, there's something that says summarize values by, and I'm going to change it from sum to average. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's not even coming up when I right click on my Mac.
Okay.
Is there another way to do that?
So it's looking different on your Mac. You don't see the summarize values by?
No, not when I do the.
Okay, what if in values, in the little box on the bottom right, if you click on the drop down, do you have an option that says value field settings?
Okay, let me go back because I feel like now everything has disappeared. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna have to restart this.
That's okay. Yeah, and thank you guys for asking so many questions. It's been really fun. Yeah, so under values, you're just going to want to look for value field settings.
Oh, okay. I found it.
Amazing. And then when you click on that, you can change sum to average and hit OK.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Can my guiders guide me again on what we're going to do to finish up this pivot table?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the last part that I did was just like I took the remote ratio and I just like put it into a filters option. And after that, I went to a little drop down and I just selected 100.
That's perfect. That's great. That is exactly right.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you put the remote ratio in the rows column also?
In the rows? Okay, so let's take a look at what would happen if we put it in the rows. Maybe we can put it here. So do you see how that is like a little bit more confusing than if we just have it in the filters?
But I selected just the 100 and then it gave me the same.
When you say you selected just the 100, is remote ratio still in your filters?
No, it's not in my filters, it's in my rows.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like you minimized the other ones and only showed like 100, let's say. Yeah, you can definitely do that. I would just recommend if you're filtering by something, I would just put remote ratio in filters just because it's going to be the easiest probably to interpret. Or like we went over earlier, we can also insert a slicer to make a really pretty filter that's interactive.
Sounds good. Thank you, ma'am.
Amazing. Any more questions? These have
No,
all been
we
great
went
questions.
over adding commas, decimal points, and things of that nature for symmetry, and how will we go about like sorting the data after we get the pivot table?
Absolutely. That is a great question. So if we want to sort the data, let's say in this pivot table, we want to go from the highest average salary all the way to the lowest average salary. So we want the highest average salary on the top and the lowest average salary on the bottom. What we're going to do is we're going to click on any of these numbers. I'm going to right click. I'm going to, instead of hitting summarize values by like we normally do, I'm going to hit sort. And I'm going to choose the way I want to sort it. So let's say we want the biggest salary on the top. So sort largest to smallest. I didn't see my screen change, so let me just make sure I did that. Okay, yeah. So now we have the largest salary on the top and the smallest salary on the bottom. That's how you sort it. Great question.
Would you recommend altering it to make it more symmetrical since you have one number with like 4 decimal points?
Yeah, you can if you want to. You can like change the number of decimal points using in the number tab on the home screen. You can change the number of decimal points using these little buttons right here, but it's just up to your preference and what whoever is asking you to make the pivot table wants.
I mean, you can select all of them all at once while you're doing that, right?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Thanks.
Any more questions before we start our break?
I have a question. So do we need to have the grand total on the pivot chart? And is there a way to remove it?
Yes. Which pivot chart? Were you looking at one of the examples or are you asking just in general?
Like the one we just did. Maybe.
This one?
Yeah.
Is it showing grand totals for you?
Yeah, it is.
So if you want to, you can click on, so it's not showing for me, but if you click on like the cell that says grand total, you can right click. And I'm pretty sure if you go down, there's an option that says remove grand totals. But it just depends on whether you want them or not, or whether they're like useful or not.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I think grand total is in the last row in your table also.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was expecting to see it in the columns. Sometimes it's in the columns and sometimes it's in the rows. Thank you so much for catching that. Yeah, so for example, thank you, good catch. So I'm going to click right click on grand total and I'm just going to hit remove grand total. So it just depends on whether you want the grand total or not, or whether you think it's useful in your analysis. Thank you for that catch.
Is there a way to flip the table, you know, the X and Y axis, like changing, you know,
Like change which one you want on which?
rows and columns? Is there a way
Yeah,
to...
you can just switch the rows and the columns. So like, for example, I can put columns, like employment type in columns, and that makes it look like this. Does that answer your question?
I was just wondering if it was like I remember something with like a button, if there was a button or something where they did it, It just rotated it.
Okay, I can definitely look into that and respond in a bit in the chat, but I would have to look into that.
That might be Tableau, though. Maybe.
Yes, probably. Good question. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen. Before we enter the 10-minute break, I just wanted to see if there's any final questions, because we're going to shift out of Excel and shift into Tableau in just a minute. All right. In that case, thank you guys so much. This has been really, really fun working with Excel and talking about data analytics. We will email you those resources about Excel after the workshop today. But now we are going to start a little break, and then we're going to shift over, and my colleague Alfonso is going to talk about Tableau and data visualizations with you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Melanie. It's been
you.
nice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's so much fun working with you.
Thank you.
Is it my presentation time, Melanie?
Yes, if you want to go ahead and do the presentation, and then we can do a short little break, and then Alfonso can take over to work on Tableau.
Yes, that sounds great. Hi, everyone. Well, it's me again. I know you've been hearing my voice, and you know, I'm Yasmin Ali, founder and CEO of Skillspire. Skillspire has been around for 7 years now. 2000 since 2016. And I wanted to just give you a little bit of background. I'm just going to take a very short time and just do a quick presentation, tell you who we are. I know that, we've been having plenty of workshops lately in different, courses and programs. So just wanted to give you a little bit of an update. So I'm going to share my screen and let me know if you can see. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just change this to mode. Nice to see Alfonso.
Hi, Yasmin. It's good to see you too.
Good to see you. So I hope you're enjoying Melanie's thing. She did a great job. She's actually overseas, and she was very kind enough to do this workshop with us. And I'm sure it's getting late, and she'll step away, and Alfonso would take over. Just a little bit of background about Skillspire. I, an immigrant, came to this country over 30 years ago. I was kind of fortunate enough that, I think I had my husband who was in tech who kind of pushed me to say that, what, computer science is the way to go. And this was back like 25, 30 years ago. So I did my bachelor's, I did my, master's, and then worked for almost, I would say, close to 10 years. And then took a break for family. I had kids after a very long time. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to take that break. Took almost 11-year break. And then after my kids were like in middle school or whatever, I said, I want to get back. I did all this stuff. I studied and I want to get back. And at that time, when I tried to get back into the job market, it was very difficult. I'm thinking to myself, it's like, hey, I had a great job. I was actually a project manager, technical project manager, when I left the company and left my job. And now coming back after 11 years, it felt like as if I was starting from complete scratch. And got me thinking that, if this is hard, so hard for me as a person who has a background, technical background, and I would say, a little bit of network, if it's so intimidating and overwhelming, how hard must it be for people who are coming to this country with some fantastic degrees and and background and who want to get into tech. And that's got me thinking about starting and, helping more people towards this. So we are a social impact company helping to transition more refugees, immigrants, underrepresented communities, women, people of color, or just anybody who are struggling to get into the tech industry. So we do all these. I mean, we teach all these courses, anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, and then help you with job search support and, and be your mentor, be your ally in your job search. So with that quick background, I want to ask you a few questions, and please feel free to unmute and answer. You're all here because you are aspiring for certain things, right? Can you name a few things that you are looking to get out of your career? Or if you're transitioning from something, what are you looking to get? Chablis.
Hi, Yasmin. I actually think I spoke with you on the phone earlier last week or maybe the week before.
Yes.
But I was a technical recruiter, worked for a couple, I'm in the DC area, so I worked with some data privacy companies, Amazon. And amidst the layoffs, I really wanted to transition into project management, and have been learning the differences between more technical project management, operations project management, that sort of thing. And I started with the Google project management course, which does give you some very basic elementals, but the technical aspect is very difficult to learn. Trying to navigate through these free trials and make the best of them with pre-recorded information has been pretty challenging. So I know that I really wanted to go the technical program manager route, and just learning, some of the, not necessarily a Azure or AWS, but even just the data analytical software, or smart sheets or anything like that has been, it's been a bit challenging. So that's why I signed up for this, just to kind of level off some of the other expertise based off of what they're looking for in your background.
Yeah. Have you found it useful with Melanie's thing today?
I definitely did. In the class, it mentioned a lot about being able to quickly pull together the charts and to understand the data. And so it's one thing to be able to pull it together, but to understand what you're looking at and to translate that is a different skill set. So this is where has certainly come in. So certainly it's definitely helping.
Thank you. Thank you
Mhm.
for, bring that up. Can you maybe somebody can tell me that, what are you aspiring for? Say a year from now or 2 years from now, what are you looking for in your career? You can put it on the chat. You can unmute and, come over and just, let me know.
I would like to be a data analyst in the healthcare industry in particular, because I'm transitioning from a career in healthcare from my
Nice.
home country. I'm also, yeah, I'm from like Nigeria, but I'm currently in the US pursuing a master's in business administration. But what I would really like to do would be in the line of business analytics or data analytics in healthcare, as opposed to being a clinician, or a medical
Nice.
doctor that I was. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you want to transition more into a little bit more on the tech side. Anybody else? What else are you aspiring for?
I'm trying to find a position as data analyst also and leave my current position. After getting my master's and stuff, it's not easy, like my corporate company. So I'm just trying to, transition and hopefully become a data analyst in tech or something of that nature. Just trying to break in.
Nice, very nice. Anyone else? So some of the things that I hear when I'm talking to people, right? They're aspiring for better salary. They're aspiring for job security. They want, opportunities for growth and development, flexible, where they can actually be remote, flexible working days. And, of course, coming out of COVID, all of us know that, everyone's looking for flexible work hours. And also, not just that, but there are people who also want to make an impact, right? And data analytics is just unique in that you can make an impact on clean energy, you can make an impact on healthcare. It's just so pervasive across so many industries. So, so these are some of the things that I always hear from students or potential students. Challenges that they go through are because they don't have the lack of technical skills and education. They don't necessarily, they may have a degree already or may not, and they don't have the time or the money to invest another 4 years or another 2 years in education. And also, they do go through some bias and discrimination. Say, for instance, you are from a different sort of background or you're a person of color, then you don't see, you see a biased approach from, say, coworkers or maybe even hiring managers. They don't have the lack of professional mentorship that's available. So maybe, you don't have anyone close to you who can actually mentor you or maybe coach you as like, hey, you know what, you seem to be interested in this or you're good at this. Why don't you pursue this thing? You're more of an investigative person. Why don't you do this course? So, that kind of support they lack a lot. Financial constraints is a big thing. Most of the time, I think a lot of people, and we do see this now that, four-year degree colleges, as you know, um, you know, um, enrollment is plunging because people have figured out that, skills-based hiring is definitely on the rise. And so, it's financially, this is much more affordable rather than going, and then of course, time-wise. And, I think cultural barriers, um, people come from so many different cultures. The way they are treated in certain areas in their workplace is also, some people have those workplace biases happening. And more importantly, imposter syndrome. Can I really do it? Am I capable of this? These are some of the challenges that we actually see among all of our students. And I'll tell you that um, imposter syndrome is not just for newbies, but then even people who are working in the industry feel this every single day. And it's a matter of just telling yourself that, you know what, everyone's in the same boat. We're not, overnight experts in anything. We all take our time. And as long as you keep working towards it, you can easily get it. And you shouldn't let that imposter syndrome take over you. And if you need help, of course, you can always reach out to various organizations or even us, just even brainstorm. Feel free to reach out to us. So our mission, as I mentioned, is to break down barriers that preclude women, people of color, underrepresented communities, or just basically anyone who's struggling to get into the tech workforce. How are we different? Well, one of the biggest things I would say is we are a smaller and very community oriented and very close knit program, coding bootcamp. So, which means that our class sizes are smaller. You get one-on-one attention from the instructors. Flexible evening and weekend classes. If you're working full time, these classes are offered in the evenings and weekends, so you're absolutely able to take them. And they're anywhere from 3 months to 5 months. So they're 12 to 20 weeks with about 18 hours per week. And it's a combination of live instruction and labs, live instruction with the instructors like Melanie and Alfonso, and labs are with TAs that, you get the help you need. And all of them work in the industry. So they are your first mentor, so you can ask them any question um, regarding, data analytics or, data science or whatever. We also provide you career support services. So halfway through the course, our career coach slash recruiter is going to come in, help you prepare your resume. Having a good LinkedIn profile is really important, and start to just coach and mentor you. And once you graduate and get your certificate of completion, then giving you resources to, continuously keep updating your skills by portfolio projects. And then also, um, being a recruiter, he or she is going to maybe help share your resume with companies that we have partnerships with. We have partnerships with a few companies, and we're constantly trying to add to that list. And whenever there are openings, we definitely share your resume with them. Guaranteed internship. We don't have a guaranteed internship for data analytics. We do have one for software engineering. We have a partnership with a local company here in Seattle that takes on these interns, and it's an unpaid internship, but it goes a long way as a real world experience for you. And you definitely have our community. We have a Discord community where we post a lot of resources, and people ask me, how long do we get your support? As long as you need it. Once you get your first job, then you're good, and most people don't come back. Our fees are definitely much more affordable if you compare it with other coding boot camps. We're probably in the range of 4,500 to 6,500. That's the range. If you feel that's a little too much, then we definitely offer monthly payment plans as well, and even that on a sliding scale. So feel free to reach out to me. I'll put down my, you know, my meeting link here. Feel free if you have any questions, after the workshop, book a time with me if you want to, specifically talk about your situation or you need any sort of help. Any questions here before I move on?
Do you have a community on LinkedIn, or are we allowed to connect with instructors and things of that nature?
Yeah, so we do have a community on LinkedIn, and that's for graduates. Once they graduate, they get onto our LinkedIn group. Thank you, Robert. I'm assuming that's Robert. Is it Robert?
Raheem. Raheem.
Oh, Raheem. Okay, got it. Sorry. Okay, so here's the course overview. I just want to, this is the last slide. Um, we offer a variety of courses. Of course, you're listening to, we have a course coming up on May 8th for the Intro to Data Analytics, and Melanie's going to be your instructor. Other courses that we offer are full stack web development, and we do 2 stacks. We do the Python stack and the MERN stack, both separately. It's not together. Each one is 4 months long. Intro to data analytics, as you know, you're probably, listening to the instructor talking right now. Then the advanced data analytics, data science. So I would say these 2 courses are 3 months long, so 3 months each. And in the introductory course, we start off with advanced Excel, going through a lot of SQL, Power BI. Typically, we do use Power BI. I know we had to switch last minute to Tableau because of licensing issues, but that's one of the biggest reasons we are a Microsoft Learning partner. And so we do offer you licenses as part of our school. You become our student. And then finally, we give you an introduction to Python. And then in the advanced course, then you get into more of the deep dive, and I think Alfonso can talk to it, the NumPy, Pandas, and those libraries and things like that, statistical and data modeling, machine learning. So that's what we teach in the advanced data analytics and data science. There are a couple of other software engineering courses that we teach, and that's Java with cloud computing with AWS, and C# with Azure Cloud. These are both, I would say, the backend engineering, although in Java and cloud, we do teach Spring Boot framework, which is very popular right now. And in the C#.NET architecture, of course, it's the Microsoft .NET. And one of our very popular courses is also cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is also a 4-month program, and we partner with a learning platform called Hack the Box, and let me know if I mean, I don't want to, give you too much information here. I know that all of you are more into data analytics, but if you need any information about these courses, feel free to set up time with me and I'd be happy to go over. And then, also I'm going to leave you our website, which is skillspire.net, which has all the information, and it also has there. Um, It has all the information, the price, the payment plan information. Typically, we offer anywhere from 4 months to 6 months, but there are cases that we have done sliding scale as well. So feel free to reach out. Don't let financial barriers stop you from moving forward and achieving your goals. That's probably one of the best things, one of the most important advice that I would say. People always shy away saying that, I don't know whether I can do this. Talk to us. We can definitely help you. We've worked with people from all sorts of background, and they have really benefited and they have been able to make a huge difference. Even after the course is finished, sometimes, they go on to continue doing their payments. Um, so that way, maybe you're still looking for a job and we can, help you get into that next stage of your life. That's all I have in terms of the presentation. And here's my contact information. I'll leave my email here. It's yasmin@skillspire.net. If you have any questions, and that's my phone number right there, you can directly reach me. Um, I hope I was able to give you a glimpse into what we do. And if you have any questions, Alfonso has been our instructor. He can definitely give you a little bit more background. Um, but I'll let Alfonso take it from here.
Hi, Yasmin. Thank you so much for the presentation and the introduction. And yeah, I think I can adjust on the contents because this is very important material in terms of allowing the students to choose the course that best works for whatever you're looking for, and guiding you through that entire process. And I also wanted to just second some of the things that you said, Yasmin, in terms of some of the experience that some of us go through when we immigrate into this country. Like I immigrate 10 years ago into the US from Latin America, and I wasn't, or I am not still like a techie or a person with a software engineering background or anything like that. And then I moved to the Bay Area, to San Francisco, and then I found out that everyone was coding. Every single thing was done with code, and I felt like I couldn't. I felt like I didn't speak the language, and I don't mean the language English. I meant the language of code that every single person spoke, and that you needed to know if you wanted to get anywhere. And I'm from Costa Rica, from Latin America, and coming from Latin America, I didn't know this. I just got here and I was thrown with the wolves, and I suddenly had to learn coding, had to learn an entire new language, not to take into account the fact that I was still learning English better. My English was very broken and very poor at the time, and I was having to learn English and I had to learn coding, and it was a whole mess. And I thought I was never going to be a coder. I thought I was never going to be able to do this. I saw people building software and I saw people live coding, and I was like, this is out so far outside of the bounds of what I understand. And then it just took a long time. It just took a lot of time and late nights trying to struggle with code, and then eventually I got there. And I also wanted to second something that Yasmin said in terms of the imposter syndrome, because of course at the beginning we all have it. We all feel like we uh, we know what we don't know, and we think that everyone else also knows that, but they don't. They don't know what you don't know. So then you are the only one who can convey your talents and your skills to organizations in a way that might be helpful for your job, or might be helpful for your unit or for your team, and then just take it from there. And that said, and like I mentioned, I've been in the United States for 10 years, and I don't know if I think Yasmin, you made an introduction at the beginning, and Melanie probably did too. I am a data scientist. I'm a professor of statistics at the University of Texas at Austin, and I have my job, and I teach master students statistics and coding, and I've been teaching for SkillsFire for since last year. And the imposter syndrome is still there. It never goes away. You always think that you're gonna get caught, and it's super weird. It's super strange. So also just wanted to second the fact that these are feelings and insecurities and struggles that we all have to deal with, and that they never go away. We just become better at either hiding them or at focusing on our strengths rather than on what we don't have. So that just as a motivation in case you're on the fence and you're feeling like maybe this is not for me, or am I going to be able to get there? You will. You absolutely will. And we're here to help you on that process. We're here to work with you, work with you one-on-one on the coding part, work with you one-on-one on the learning part, and also working with you one-on-one on the career path, because it's not only about coding, it's also about learning how to swim the waters of the entire tech world that might be so foreign to some of us, that the support that SkillsPire provides is stupendous. It's amazing. I wish here the University of Texas had such a robust system to support students as SkillsPire does. Because the way that students convey to me, the SkillsPire students convey to me how they feel so supported is, I think, what makes SkillsPire so different, so special. And so in that sense, it is also one of the strengths of this program. So with that said, the next thing that I want to say, and given that I just joined halfway through, I'm doing some sort of introduction all over again. I'm sure Melanie already went through a lot of this, but Estefania is our fantastic TA. She was one of my students in the IDA class, and she was a star. And so I'm very happy to have you here, Stefania, and a shout out to you for all the work and support you've been doing to help us with this and to help us today. So just very happy that you're here, and I think all of you, if you join the program, you're gonna keep working a lot with Stephanie, and you're gonna see how amazing she is. And of course, if you work with Melanie too, she's a star too. This part of the workshop today is gonna focus on data visualization, and I'm gonna share my screen now so that I can have at least the screen shared before we start this part. So if you can see the presentation there, let me know. And if you have any issues, also let me know. But hopefully you're able to see the data visualization presentation here. And so what I was saying is that as much as it might not be as fun with me as it was with Melanie, mostly what I'll be talking about is how to make the leap from data analysis, from what you were doing with Melanie in Excel, looking at the numbers and looking at the tables. How do we make that jump towards data visualization? Because we need to know, and I heard some of the discussion that some of you were having before in terms of we need to know the data, but we also need to know how to communicate the data. And that is another skill that is not necessarily coding, that you folks need to work on, that you folks need to build. And some of you who come from other fields know the power of storytelling. And so in that sense, data visualization is a key component of how to convey the data that you have, that you know so well. How can you transmit it into an audience that doesn't necessarily have either the skills or the knowledge with data that you have? And so in that sense, before jumping into Tableau, I'm gonna make the Karate Kid thing where the teacher says, you're not gonna fight yet. First, we need to go over some fundamentals of data visualization, and then we're gonna go into the fun part of Tableau. Also wanted to say in terms of Tableau and Power BI, IDA, like Yasmin and Melanie mentioned, is focused on Power BI because we have the licenses and you can have access to it. As much as, and Stefania might remember me complaining about this a lot during the course, that Power BI is not necessarily my favorite tool of visualization, but it is used so much in the data science and the data analytics industry that it is important for you to know it, for you to have practice on it, and for you to have a portfolio of projects that you have built on Power BI that you can show your employers what you're capable of doing. But today we'll do Tableau because it has a license that we can all access right now. We don't need to be a student of Skillspire to access that license. And also because Tableau is very fun. I really have a great time building visualizations and exploring data in Tableau in ways that maybe are not as evident to me at the beginning. And so in that sense, I really appreciate Tableau. And so who knows, maybe, and Yasmin, cover your ears, maybe in the IDA, we might take some time to just go over a little bit also of Tableau. Because in data science, the more things you have covered, the more your spread is of contents, the more chances you're going to have in the job market, even if the skills are transferable. If you know Power BI in a way, you also know Tableau. And you also know Oracle Analytics, and you also know all the other visualization and dashboard tools. Because even if the tools are somewhat different, the logic and the concepts are very similar. So before I go straight into the content of data visualization, because I've been talking for a few minutes now, does anyone have any questions, any comments about anything that I've said, anything you want to share before we go into some of the dynamics of data visualization? Also, feel free to just talk because I cannot see the chat here, I believe. So just feel free to on mic and then share your comments. And if not, just raise your hand or write it in the chat, and then Stephanie can read it for us or something like that. So what's up, folks? Any questions, comments, anything in the chat?
No, nothing in the chat yet.
Okay, great. So let's then go straight into data visualization. And so for data visualization, I'm going to go and reframe again the model that I think Melanie mentioned at the beginning, because this model, which was built by Gartner, it's what they call the data maturity model. It's very helpful in terms of understanding the different stages of the data analytics process. And so the first stage is, how do we do descriptive analysis? How do we grab a data set and explore what happened in that data set? Eventually, we're going to try to understand why did something happen. So we're going to try to diagnose how or why something happened. And as you can see, as you move forward in terms of difficulty, you go into the different levels of analysis, but also the amount of value that it adds into organizations increases. So in that sense, of course, descriptive analytics is the first step, but it is also the foundation for diagnostic analysis, predictive analysis, and prescriptive analysis. And that is the reason why on this workshop, we're going to focus on the descriptive analysis. Because data visualization, at the beginning, of course, is all about knowing what is the data trying to tell us. We can guide with some questions, we can guide with some insights of what we know from the data, but generally what we want is to see what is the data trying to say to us. What insights does this information give us that we can use to eventually go over diagnostics, prediction, and prescription? Okay, so I think, yeah, this is what we're going to be focusing on today. I have some admits here that I'm going to allow into the room. And so data visualization, like I mentioned, focuses on the descriptive analysis. And then the second step of data visualization is all about storytelling with data. How do we grab the data that we know, that we see what it is there, and we build a story with those data? And so here I have an example, and this is something you might have heard in the context of the US, which is intergenerational mobility. So basically, what happens in the US is that depending on the county or the zip code where you're born, that's going to determine a lot of your income levels in the future. And so there are different organizations that build these stories and build these maps to share with you a story about data. I also have another example that I want to show you here. I'm going to stop presenting and I'm going to open it up because I think it's also a very interesting one, and it was published on the Washington Post a few weeks ago, and I think it's another great example of how to do storytelling with data. So let me just open it up and share the screen with you. Here. So it's an article that explores and tries to answer the question about why the south of the US, why people in the south of the US, here in Texas where I live, have such low credit scores. And as you might know, in the US, your credit score is what determines so much. It determines if you can get loans. It determines if you can have a house. It determines so much of your future and your life is determined by your credit score. And then it just happens that in the south of the US, people have very low credit scores. And then they're trying to find a reason of why that is. Why does the South have such low credit scores? And then from there, they build this amazing visualization that you can see. You can hover over any county in the US and see the credit scores that people have. So for example, I'm gonna zoom in here and I'm gonna look for Travis County, which is where I live. Travis County should be somewhere. Oof, I'm lost. I don't even know where I live. Bastrop County. This is Travis County. Here it is. So Travis County is in yellow, which means it has a little better credit score, but everything around it has very low credit score. I think here some of the cities have a better credit records, but overall the credit records in Texas are very bad. Now, if we go up here to Seattle, where Skillspire is, where is somewhere around here, in Washington. I don't know exactly, and Yasmin will forgive me for not knowing exactly what county it is, but you can see
It's
that the
King
credit
County.
scores. Which one?
King County.
King County. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Stefania. So there it is. It's on dark yellow, which is the highest average of credit records in the country. So then you ask yourself the question, well, people here in Austin live okay. I don't think there's anything strange about it. Why is that the case? Why is it that in Washington, where there are like all these companies similar to Austin, it's a tech city too, why is this such a difference with credit records? So then what the researchers did is they started trying to answer that question with different variables. So they said, we have credit records. Let's cross compare with other variables and see what happens. So the first one, and then this is the article, I'm just going to be scrolling through it, because the first thing that they did is they were like, well, what happens with, let me just find it somewhere over here, because this is just the medical lab here. Oh, I think they removed those maps. So I'm just going to tell you the story without the maps. And then we can make our own hypothesis about what the problem is. And you might have seen below what the final answer is. But then some people were saying, well, for example, in the US, we have very distributed racial groups all over the country. So, for example, you know that in the south of the US, in the border, Texas, here in Arizona, New Mexico, California, in the south, you have a higher share of population that is African American or a higher share of the population that is Hispanic. And so basically what they said is, well, it makes sense that that in places where there are racial inequalities in the US, there are low credit scores. And they just run the models and then they find out that no, there are places that are very diverse. For example, here in New York City, you have the Bay Area, which is also one of the most diverse places in the world. Even you have Seattle, which is a very diverse city, Chicago, a lot of immigration, a lot of Hispanic people, a lot of African American people, and still you don't have low credit records. So then they're like, okay, it's not race, it's not racial inequality. What happens between cities and rural areas? So that was their next question. They're like, okay, so maybe in the cities, people have better credit records, and in the rural areas, people have worse credit records because the South is more rural than the North or other areas of the country. And then they start finding, oh yeah, like King County, Seattle is very urban, California is very urban, some cities here in Texas are very urban, and they have better credit records. So they run a data analytics model, they crunch the numbers, and eventually they find out that no, there's no difference too. There's no difference either. For example, here in Texas, You have Dallas, which is one of the largest cities in the country. You have Houston, which are very highly populated urban areas. You have Miami in Florida, which is very urban, and they have very low credit records. So then they don't. It's not about race. It's not about urban or rural areas. It's not about income. They just really didn't know what explains the credit records of the South in the US. They really don't know. So then in that process of discovering what the data shows, someone raises their hand and they say, what about medical debt? What about the different states where there are no protections for the amount of medical debt that you can get into? And if you are from abroad, or even if you're in the US, you probably have heard about how the healthcare system in the US can be very controversial. And depending on the state where you are, uh, the price of getting treatment is ridiculous. I went to the hospital a few months ago because I was just having some like anxiety. My heart was palpitating, whatever. And then I just got a few checks, and then I got a bill that was so ridiculously high that I had to go basically to court to contest it, because basically I was going to have to sell my car to pay for like the 3 exams they made me in 2 hours. I was just like, it's unbelievable how much money you have to pay for healthcare. And so what they found out, and now I'm going to show you the map where they answer the question. When they find out that the South has much higher medical debt, then they start finding out that there are other states where that's not that big of a problem. In California, in Washington, in New York, in the North, the states have implemented laws that add much more protection to the amount of medical debt that you can accrue. And then in the South, that is not happening. So you can see here in blue the percentage of people who have serious medical debt. Just like it was almost me here in Texas. There's no protection, and they were trying to charge me a lot of money. And so when you have a lot of medical debt, because we all have health issues, um, and then that doesn't get protected in any way, that decreases your credit record. And so it's not about race, it's not about income, it's not about urban, rural. It is about the protections that each state gives to people who have medical issues. And then you see a map of health problems, chronic health problems, and you have worse health problems in the south of the US, more chronic health issues in the south of the US. So then the story starts to take shape. And then you start seeing that this relationship that maybe wasn't obvious at the beginning, it actually makes entire sense. If you don't have medical debt, if you don't have medical insurance, you have chronic disease, you're going to have all this money that you have to pay, you're probably going to end up in debt, and that's going to decrease your credit score. And then they showed this map about the states that increased protections to medical debt. So you can see that the states in the South, the blue ones, are the ones that didn't increase protections for medical debt. So look at this map that I'm showing you here, and now look at the map that I'm going to scroll up of of uh, of credit scores. So remember the blue here in this map. Now I'm going to go up all the way to the beginning, and look how it looks here. It is basically the same region. There's some pockets here, but it is basically the same region that didn't expand protections for medical debt that have lower credit scores. So the reason that I want to show you this example is because, to me, even if it's a somewhat controversial topic and it's a national conversation and everyone has a different opinion about everything that's going on here, it is a very good example of how you can tell a story using data. You have an initial question that you find ways to structure in an initial visualization. And then from there, you start using the data to try to answer that question, and then to substantiate the different relationships that you might be finding across the data. You eventually find that it is all about medical debt. So this is a very cool report of insurance, of medical debt, and all the relationships that show the story about why the South in the US has worse credit records. So I wanted to show you this example mostly because I feel it's a very good illustration of how to tell a story with data, how to use the maps, how to use the numbers that you have that are an Excel spreadsheet or a database, and then tell a story that has color, that has personal insights, and then that can convey a very powerful message. Of course, in our business, in my daily life, my data doesn't look as amazing, and I'm not able to build so fast maps that look as amazing as this one's, but baby steps, right? We start with simple maps and we work our way up from there. So I'm gonna, before I go back to the presentation, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I see a few questions here from Mary. So did they overlay demographic data? Yes, they did. And that's what I was saying. And I somewhat skipped that part, that they ran several models. And then in the models, they do find out that there are correlations between demographic groups, but that is not what explains the difference in credit records. And then when they, Mary says, when they ran the data for education level and medical debt, they found out that it was not racialized. It is, right? Because we know that there are different groups in the US that have worse education levels and worse outcomes in any way. But when you run the model and you're able to isolate the effect of demographics and the effects of racialized differences, you still have the question that you need to answer. How do they get protection from medical debts laws? Mary asks. Are the laws and the politicians also not racially motivated? Yes, those are great questions. So to answer the first one, yes. In states, for example, like California or Washington, your medical debt doesn't get reflected in your credit score. In Texas, for example, the city of Austin, where I live, recently passed a bill to do the same, where if I incur medical debt, it's not gonna get reported on my credit record. So for example, that's a protection by law that happens in certain places. But if the state doesn't pass a law like that, or it doesn't protect it, then you're on your own. And so the laws and the politicians are also not racially motivated. That's a great question. I don't have an answer. I think, or I have an answer, but it's just my personal opinion. And I think we all can think about this. But I think, and Mary, I appreciate you bringing this up, because these are the types of conversations that these stories are trying to elicit. Right? We look at this and we start asking questions, and we start sharing our insights, and we start saying like, well, maybe we need some other data, or we need to look about what Mary's saying, voting, political voting data, or whether the politicians are good or bad, or whatever, however you want to you want to frame it. But good visualization, good data storytelling should leave us with more questions than answers, because it should just make the juices of our brains flow in different ways that lead us to ask more questions. And think about how this might be reflected in your business. Of course, this is US, and this is political, and this is public policy, but think about an exploration of, for example, why are we selling more or less in different states? And what could be motivating that? That is also data storytelling, and those are also the questions that data analytics and data visualization are going to lead us to ask. And that's the type of conversations that data storytelling can be very helpful for. Okay, I see a few other comments here, but okay, yeah, thank you, Stefania, for sharing the link. And then you folks can access it there and read the full story. It's very interesting, but I just wanted to share a little snapshot of it, because I think it's a very good example of storytelling with data. So let's go into, and I'm gonna probably talk about for something like 10 more minutes, and then I'm gonna take a little 5 to 10 minute break.